So as you can guess, today we're going to be changing the control arm on my 2005 Chevrolet Impala SS. A couple of bushings have gone bad, and I've decided that I'm going to change the whole control arm. It's getting kind of rusty as well, so yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. I got this piece from our good friends over at Rock Auto. Again, shipped in 2 days. We got here real quick, good prices. So let's see how this works out. Okay, so the first thing to do before we jack up the car to do this control arm is that we need to make sure that the handbrake is on, which I've already done, and we want to loosen the lug nuts for the tires while the tires are on the ground. It's easier to get the lug nuts off while the car is on the ground. If the car is off the ground and you know, let's say you have a rear wheel drive car, the wheel could just spin while you're trying to loosen the lug nuts. If you have a front wheel drive car, in essence what you're doing when the car is off the ground and you're trying to take the lug nuts off is you know, the transmission is sitting against the parking pawl in the transmission. So if you're trying to, you know, undo your lug nuts, you're basically putting stress on that parking pawl, which you don't want to do while the vehicle's in park. So with the car on the ground, you know, the tire won't go anywhere because it's seated on the ground. Plus, I've got the handbrake on. It's just safer for the vehicle, and it's easier on the vehicle. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take the tire off. Now, as you can see, I'm not taking the tire off. I'm just loosening these nuts on the tire. Now, as you can see, I'm going to jack up the car using the subframe. I've got the jack placed right in the middle. You want to be careful with the subframe. It's made out of aluminum, and as you can see on the right hand side here, it does dent fairly easily. So if you're going to use this spot, make sure that you have a jack that can spread out the load, like it has maybe like a rubber cushion on the jack, or use a piece of wood or something so it doesn't actually dig into the subframe. My jack has a rubber seat on the head, so I should be okay using that spot there. As you can see, I'm using wood to put my jack stand on. These feet are pretty, I guess, I mean, they're not really sharp, but they will damage your concrete with the weight of the car, or your asphalt. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting 2 pieces of wood underneath the feet to make sure I protect the concrete or the asphalt underneath. So this is my jacking point right here, or where I'm going to put my jack stands. It's already kind of busted up a little bit, but that's where the jack stands are supposed to go. That's where the car is supposed to be jacked, but because I'm putting jack stands, obviously I can't jack from that point. So just make sure that my wood is lined up underneath the jack stand. Make sure the jack stand is lined up with this jacking point here. I gotta go do the other side now. Now, of course, I will be leaving my jack stand, or sorry, my jack in place as well, just as added security. You may have other spots on the car that you can put your jack stands if the jacking points are too rusted out. You can try just a little bit further down on the frame, probably about 6 inches or so. There's another little spot there. But mine are okay, they're holding. So now I'm just going to take the tire off by undoing these lug nuts. Okay, so as you can see, there is my my ball joint. You can see it's leaking a bit of grease, and it's been making some noise. There's the rest of the control arm that we'll be replacing is this. That guy. But we'll be replacing this guy here, this control arm. And yes, and I'll also be servicing the brakes at the same time. The first thing I'm going to start off by doing is disconnecting this sway bar link. The sway bar goes to the back there, but it also attaches to the control arm right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove that that link. So it's 14 millimeter on the top and 14 millimeter on the bottom. Now it's probably a pretty good idea to hit this with some penetrating oil first. But since I was under here last week and did it last week, I'm just going to go ahead and try to remove it. But like I said, it's a pretty good idea to hit it with some penetrating oil first to loosen up the nut. Okay, so I'm having a bit of trouble getting this this link off. I think it might be rusted to the bolt. This little shaft here that the bolt slides through, I believe it might be somehow maybe rusted to the bolt. But I did get the nut off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can just remove the control arm with the link, and then try and take the link off after I get it off the car. So the next step that I'm going to do or take is to remove this little nut here. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see, but there's a nut there, right there. Usually it has a cotter pin in it. So you just take the cotter pin out and then take the nut off. So that's what I'm going to do next. So as you can see, it does have a cotter pin in it, right there, just above my thumb, and I'm going to take that off first. I'm not too worried about saving this because I already know that my my new control arm comes with a new pin, so I'm not too worried about it. Did break off a little bit in there though. Okay, I'm using a 18 millimeter wrench to just kind of sneak it in there. There you go. I think she's pretty much broken loose now. Okay, so I can't take this nut off because the boot's in the way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move over to this bolt here. Take this guy off and the one that's further down as well. Okay, to get this this bolt loosened, I used a 18 millimeter socket in the front, and I used a 22 impact on the back side, and that basically did that. It's going to open up all these little tabs for the ABS sensor, and get that wire loose. Just use a flathead screwdriver. Okay, now I'm going to go for this bolt here. It's a Torx and a nut up top. Up here. Okay. Okay, so up top here, I'm using a 21 millimeter with a cheater bar. And on the bottom, it is a T55 Torx. That's it. Simple as that. Now I'm just gonna put the bolt back on. I'm gonna try tapping the sucker through. Luckily she comes out pretty easily. So again, I'm just gonna put the nut back on, and I'm gonna give it a couple of taps with the hammer, see what happens. Not bad. That's it. So those two are out. Like so. Actually, I'm gonna, yeah. The nut came right off, which I believe I can do. Okay, take the nut off of this first. There we go. Just like that. So now I'm gonna go and try and take this this guy off here. Okay. Now I'm going to try putting the new arm back on. Just want to give it a little tap so that I can get the nut started. There we go. Perfect. So again, with my cheater bar on top. Good enough. Now, I'm just going to tighten up the nut here. And we're almost done. Put the link back on. Comes with a Zerk fitting to fill up with grease. Okay, this Zerk fitting is 8mm.
Okay, since I had such a hard time getting this this link assembly off, or the sway bar link, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some anti-seize on this bolt here and some of the parts to keep it from seizing up like last time. So I'm just using regular anti-seize here. Don't have to go too crazy with it. Just enough to give it a decent coating. And I hope that'll help. So it's washer first, then the rubber. This guy. Like that. Okay. And we'll go ahead and start threading her through. But we're going to put another orange piece with the pointy side down. We're going to put another washer. Then we're going to put our sleeve. We're going to put another washer. Another donut with the pointy side facing up. Give it a little tap. There you go. Put a little more anti-seize just at the base there. Okay, so little donut again with the pointy edge facing down. Last washer, and of course the nut. Okay, so now I want to reconnect my ABS sensor harness. Salut. I'm putting one here. It's just located just behind the.
Tu fais pas une vidéo de ce shot-là?
Hein?
Tu filmes pas?
Ouais, je filme.
Hein?
Ouais.
Ah, ok, il y a un autre shot.
Ouais, il est juste ici.
Ah, ben c'est... Nice.
And then I'm gonna put one more right here. Okay, I just finished putting all the bolts in, tie wraps, all that stuff for the lower control arm. And I figured while I'm here, I'm going to try and replace the sway bar bushing. It's this piece right here. I'll show you. This guy right here. So we're gonna take a look at that, see if we can't replace that. It's a very tight spot because there's these lines here. So you have to be very, very careful. Appears to be a 13 millimeter, but I'm gonna have to use a wrench because my socket won't fit. Okay, so once you get the bolts undone, I had a really hard time getting them undone. Your best bet is to hit them with some penetrating oil again and let them sit for a while. But I got the back one off, and I'm not going to worry about taking the front one off. I'm just going to leave it on. What I did is I just took the bracket and just spun it over the arm, and then just pulled out the bushing. This is what the bushing looks like. Okay, and as you can see, it's pretty worn out. It's gone all the way through the rubber and made a hole. So it's definitely time to replace this guy. This is my new piece. Okay. There's different sizes of these, so you have to make sure you measure the diameter of your bar. Make sure you know the diameter of your bar before you go and you buy this, because you have to know the right size to get. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of grease on the inside and on the outside, just so that it kind of goes on a little smoother here. So just open it up. Now my bar is lowered, so I'm going to have to pry it up again. You know what's probably a good idea is to undo that link. There we go. Gonna smear a little bit of grease. I'm using brake lubricant. It's for the pins of the caliper. Okay, now that I've cleaned them off, I'm just gonna put them back in. Start them off by hand before I move over to the other stuff. Okay, now that those are tied down, don't forget to retighten the sway bar link here. Okay, so now that that's done, that's how you change the bushing for your sway bar and your control arm. Like I said, for changing the bushing, your procedure should be to loosen or remove the link if you're doing the bushing just by itself. If you're doing the control arm, before you put the link on, do your bushing. If you're just doing the bushing alone, remove the link here and replace your bushing. But now that that's all back together, we're going to put our tires back on and call it a day. Thanks for watching.